The silence from Buckingham Palace was louder than any scream. Moments ago, a breach of protocol occurred that has shattered the illusion of stability at the very top of the British state. The footage emerging from the palace isn't just awkward, it is catastrophic. The tension was suffocating. The message was unmistakable. This wasn't just a meeting. This was a prime minister being dismantled without a single word being spoken. The king's body language told a story that Downing Street has been desperate to hide. What triggered this unprecedented freeze? Why is the Crown distancing itself from the government just months into its tenure? The reality is far more dangerous than the headlines admit, and what is unfolding behind closed doors could redefine power in Britain forever. The scene inside the stateroom just minutes ago was unlike anything royal correspondents have witnessed in decades. As Keir Starmer entered for what was supposed to be a routine audience, the atmosphere didn't just shift, it froze. The customary warmth, the standard pleasantries, the careful choreography of statecraft, gone. In its place was a steeliness that cut through the air like a blade. The king stood his ground, his expression unreadable, yet screaming disapproval. Starmer's hesitation was visible. His smile faltered. You could see the realization hitting him in real time. The shock, the scrambling for footing. This was supposed to be his moment to project authority alongside the monarch, but instead, he walked into a constitutional abyss. The timing could not be more devastating for the Prime Minister. Just hours before this icy reception, rumors had already begun circulating through the corridors of Westminster. The whispers of a rift were being dismissed as gossip, but the visual evidence we just witnessed confirms the worst fears of the government's strategists. The palace is not happy. The institution that prioritizes continuity above all else is signaling a break. And in the subtle, high-stakes language of royalty, a cold shoulder is equivalent to a declaration of war. The public senses the disconnect. They feel the tension. And today, in front of the world's cameras, the facade of unity crumbled completely. But this isn't just about a missed handshake or a frosty look. The signal sent moments ago represents something far deeper, something that threatens the legitimacy of the entire administration. The British people are watching their heritage being eroded, their traditions mocked, and their concerns ignored, while their prime minister seems more interested in technocratic maneuvering than defending the nation's soul. The countryside is in uproar, the economy is stalling, the social fabric is fraying. And what does Starmer offer? Bureaucratic answers to emotional questions. The patience of the crown, often a reflection of the patience of the people, appears to have run out, and the coldness radiating from the palace proved it beyond any doubt.
The reaction inside Downing Street right now is total panic. Aides are frantically trying to spin the footage. They are calling editors, demanding the narrative be softened. They are claiming it was just a matter of timing, a trick of the light. But anyone with eyes can see the truth. This was deliberate. This was a message sent from the permanent state to the temporary government. The king knows what the people are feeling. He reads the letters. He sees the crowds. He understands the mood of the nation in a way the political class has forgotten. And by drawing a line, by refusing to play the part of the passive prop, he has exposed the prime minister's isolation. The political spin machine is broken. The image of a prime minister out in the cold, literally and metaphorically, is the only thing that matters today. Inside the government, the fear is palpable. Starmer's inner circle is starting to question whether their leader can navigate a crisis of this magnitude. If he cannot command the respect of the head of state, how can he command the respect of the world? Cabinet ministers are checking their phones, watching the clip on loop, analyzing every frame. The WhatsApp groups are lighting up with terrified speculation. Some are already quietly wondering if this is the beginning of the end. The authority that Starmer wielded so confidently is evaporating. The mandate that seems so secure is shaking, and the Prime Minister knows it. You could see it in his eyes as he turned to leave. This wasn't just a bad meeting. This was a delegitimization.
The mainstream media is desperately trying to contextualize this. They are bringing on experts to talk about modernizing the monarchy and evolving protocols. They are trying to normalize the abnormal, but the public isn't buying it. The people know a snub when they see one. This was visceral. This was the ancient power of the land distancing itself from the fleeting power of politics. The establishment wants to pretend this is just a minor hiccup in the diary, but it is not. What we witnessed is the crown asserting its prerogative to signal the national mood. And in a constitutional monarchy, when the palace moves away from you, you are standing on quicksand. The questions are piling up faster than number 10 can answer them. Why did the palace choose this moment? What was said in the private moments before the cameras rolled? Did Starmer unknowingly cross a red line that no prime minister should ever cross? The political calculations have misfired spectacularly. The optics are fatal. Images of a king looking at his prime minister with cold detachment will be the defining picture of this term. Opposition leaders are already sensing the blood in the water. They know that a prime minister at odds with the palace is a prime minister who looks weak, transient, and out of touch.
But here is what makes this situation truly explosive. This isn't happening in a vacuum. Across the country, there is a growing sense that the political class has lost its way, that it has become untethered from the values and history of the nation. The king, in his silence, speaks for that history. He speaks for the continuity that people are desperate to hold on to amidst the chaos of modern governance. When the king signals disapproval, he validates the anger of millions who feel their country is changing too fast without their consent. Starmer isn't just fighting a PR battle with the royal household. He is standing against a cultural tide that sees the crown as the last line of defense against political overreach. The atmosphere inside the cabinet office must be toxic. Imagine the shouting matches happening right now. Advisors blaming protocol officers, strategists blaming the press. But nobody wants to admit the brutal truth. The problem isn't the protocol. The problem is the policy. The problem is the disconnect. The king is the ultimate barometer of British stability, and the needle just swung into the danger zone. The coldness we saw wasn't just a mood. It was a verdict. A verdict on a style of governance that feels alien to the traditions of the land.
Let's talk about what led us to this exact standoff. When this government took power, there was an assumption that the palace would simply be a rubber stamp. They assumed the monarchy would quietly assent to every radical shift, every dismantling of tradition, every bureaucratic overreach. They mistook neutrality for passivity. They thought they could reshape the country without regard for its institutional memory. For a brief moment, they thought they had tamed the system. But they were wrong. The crown is not just a decoration. It is a safeguard. And the friction we are seeing now is the friction of a government grinding against the bedrock of the nation's identity. The disappointment among the public has turned into a quiet fury, and the palace has picked up on that frequency. People are tired of being lectured. They are tired of seeing their history rewritten. They are tired of a government that seems embarrassed by the very nation it governs. The king, by his very existence, represents that history. And when the prime minister stands next to him and looks diminished, it reinforces the feeling that the current political leadership is not up to the task. The contrast was stark. On one side, centuries of duty. On the other, the fleeting ambition of the political cycle. The visual language was devastating because it was true.
The rural communities, the backbone of the kingdom, have been feeling this betrayal for months. The farmers, the landowners, the custodians of the countryside, they have been sounding the alarm about policies that threaten their way of life. They have looked to the palace as a silent ally, and today's signal confirms they are not alone. The optics of the king, a man who has spent his life championing the land, appearing cold towards a prime minister whose policies are tearing up the agricultural fabric, is not a coincidence. It is an alignment of the crown with the soil against the spreadsheet. It is a powerful, unspoken alliance that leaves the government isolated in its urban bubble. And through all of this, what has Starmer's team actually done to bridge the gap? They have doubled down.
They have treated the palace as an obstacle to be managed rather than a partner to be respected. They have leaked stories about modernizing the relationship, code for stripping away the mystique that gives the institution its power. They have tried to drag the monarchy down to the level of partisan politics. But the king refused to take the bait. Instead, he simply withdrew his warmth. He withdrew the implicit blessing that every prime minister relies on. And in doing so, he reminded everyone where the true permanence of the state resides.
The immigration crisis adds another layer of volatility to this silent clash. The social cohesion of the realm is under immense strain. Communities are fractured. The sense of shared identity is fraying. The monarchy, as the symbol of national unity, is acutely aware of these fractures. When the government fails to control the borders, when it fails to maintain the rule of law, it weakens the entire nation. The king cannot speak on policy, but he can signal his concern for the nation's health. And a government that loses control of the nation's integrity loses the confidence of the crown. The icy reception was a reflection of a fractured kingdom. The establishment media won't tell you this, but the diplomatic circles are buzzing. Ambassadors are writing cables back to their capitals right now. They are reporting that the British Prime Minister has lost the favor of the head of state. This matters on the global stage. Soft power is Britain's greatest asset, and the monarchy is the nuclear weapon of soft power. If the Prime Minister cannot leverage that relationship, he is weakened internationally. World leaders watch these interactions. They read the body language. They know that a Prime Minister who is out of step with his own sovereign is a Prime Minister on borrowed time.
There is no coherent strategy coming from number 10 to fix this. How do you fix a relationship when the other side doesn't need to say a word to defeat you? You can't debate silence. You can't spin a look. The government is fighting a ghost. They are swinging at shadows while the palace simply carries on, immovable, implacable. The weakness emanating from Downing Street is infectious. It spreads to the backbenches. It spreads to the voters. It confirms the suspicion that these people are merely squatting in the halls of power, while the real owners look on with disdain. Let's examine the specific mechanics of this power struggle. The weekly audience is supposed to be the one sanctuary where a prime minister can speak freely. It is the therapy session of the state. But if that trust is broken, if that room becomes a courtroom, the prime minister is paralyzed. We are hearing whispers that the meetings have become shorter, more formal, that the advice being given is being received with stony silence. This is the machinery of government grinding to a halt. A prime minister who cannot confide in the king is a prime minister flying blind. The mentorship that has guided leaders for generations is being withdrawn.
The cultural clash is undeniable. On one hand, you have a technocratic administration obsessed with deconstruction, with rewriting the rules, with challenging the past. On the other, you have an institution that is the past, present, and future rolled into one. The king represents the memory of the nation. Starmer represents a momentary experiment. When those two forces collide, the public instinct is to side with the memory. They know the crown will be there long after this cabinet is forgotten. The arrogance of the political class to think they could dictate terms to the palace has backfired. They poked the bear, and the bear simply turned its back. The implications for the union are terrifying. The monarchy is the glue that holds the four nations together. A prime minister who antagonizes that glue risks the integrity of the United Kingdom itself. If the king is seen as distancing himself from the Westminster government, it gives permission for the regions to do the same. It validates the grievances of those who feel London doesn't listen. This is not just a Westminster bubble story. This is a story about the survival of the state. The careless handling of this relationship reveals a staggering lack of judgment at the highest levels of government. They are playing with fire, and the smoke is filling the room.
And what about the voters? The people who voted for change, but not for a revolution against their own identity. They see this standoff and they recoil. They didn't vote for a culture war against the crown. They didn't vote to see their traditions humiliated. They feel duped. They see a government that promised competence, delivering chaos.
They see a government that promised respect, delivering insolence. The booing we heard in the competitor scenario is replaced here by a collective gasp of shock. The silence of the palace is echoed by the silence of the voters, who are quietly, decisively turning away. The advisors who thought they could sideline the palace have committed political malpractice. They forgot that the king is the only person in the room who doesn't need to worry about re-election. He plays the long game. The government plays the short game. And in the long game, the house always wins. The attempt to modernize the relationship has only served to highlight how ancient and necessary the old rules were. By trying to change the dynamic, Starmer has exposed his own limitations. He has shown himself to be a manager, not a statesman. And the British people want a statesman. Now we are left with a government in a zombie state. It has the title, but not the blessing. It has the office, but not the aura. The Prime Minister is walking a tightrope without a safety net. Every future interaction will be scrutinized. Every bow, every nod, every word will be dissected. The pressure is unbearable. He cannot force the king to smile. He cannot mandate warmth. He is powerless in the face of protocol. And that powerlessness is the ultimate humiliation for a man who thought he controlled everything. What happens next could change the course of this decade. If the palace continues the strategy of distance, the government will find itself isolated, not just from the crown, but from the moral authority of the state. The military, the civil service, the judiciary all swear allegiance to the crown, not the prime minister. If the fountain of honor runs dry, the authority of the government withers. We are entering uncharted territory, a cold war between the two halves of the Constitution, and history tells us there is only one winner in that contest. The crisis is here. It is silent, it is subtle, and it is deadly. The king has signaled, the country has understood, and the prime minister is left standing alone on the stage, the spotlight harsh and unforgiving. Is this the moment the tide turned irrevocably? Can a government survive when the symbols of the state turn against it? Or are we witnessing the slow motion collapse of an administration that misjudged its own power?